Alrighty, so today we're going to talk about Austin FC in the Moving Forward series episode, as we have now pretty much talked about all of the Texas team. We already talked about the Houston Dynamo in the last episode. We talked about FC Dallas, and now we're going to talk about Los Verdes. And for Austin, there was no doubt that this season was considered a success. I mean, this team got themselves back into the playoffs. They made a very spirited run all the way to the U.S. Open Cup final, unfortunately falling short in the final at home against Nashville SC. But if you talk to some Austin fans, they might say that, well, yes, it was considered a successful season for them, and that they, of course, made it back to the playoffs and make that run to the U.S. Open Cup final. It was also kind of a frustrating season in a way that, yeah, this team was pretty boring to watch, and that it was also kind of frustrated that this team just simply can't score. I mean, this is the lowest scoring team in the Western Conference and one of the lowest scoring team in general in the entire league. I think they're the third lowest scoring team in the league if I look at the stats. But that being said, despite that, they still finished with a 13-8-13 record, finished with 47 points. They only scored 37 goals this season while allowing 45 goals, which I think that the defense definitely helped a big part in terms of why they did as well as they did. But their goal differential was -A as well. So yeah, not a great goal differential, but they still finished sixth in the Western Conference. And to talk about how bad the attack was, there was at one point of the season, I think we were like two-thirds into the season, where at home they've only scored 11 goals up to that point, which is kind of insane to say when you're two-thirds into the season, and the fact that you only scored that many goals at home. It just kind of highlights the struggle that they have in the goal scoring. But with that being said, looking at the top goal scorer of this team, it's Owen Wolf with 7 goals. Who, by the way, I actually didn't know that Wolf was the top goal scorer and the top assist leader as well, because today he did sign a new contract extension with Austin FC. So yeah, it kind of not only it kind of makes sense the fact that they of course signed to a new contract extension, but the stats kind of backs it up. I mean, he was the top contributor both in the goals and assists department for this team. Then you got Murto Azuni with 6 goals, Brendan Vasquez with 5 goals, Guillermo Biro with 3 goals, and then the recently departed Sonny Bakari finished with 3 goals in the top 5 goal scorer list. Top assist leader, it's also Owen Wolf with 8 assists, followed by Bakari with 7 assists. Then you got Danny Pereira with 4 assists, Murto Azuni with 3 assists, and Diego Rubio rounds up the top 5 with 3 assists as well. Best win of the season. I'm gonna go with the 3-1 win that they had against the San Jose Earthquakes, which I actually was at at this game down at Q2 Stadium. And while I love the experience, and in terms of the atmosphere that I finally get to experience of going to an Austin FC game, yeah, as a Quakes fan, I was not so thrilled in terms of how the resort went. And I will also like to say that when it comes to picking my best win of the season, this is only for MLS itself. So I know some Austin fans will say, well, why didn't you just pick the 2-1 win that they had against Minnesota in the semifinal, which equally should be the best win of the season? And was also kind of interesting is that's also another game I actually win in person. And some might say that because I'm a Loons fan, I decide not to pick that resort, because yeah, as a Loons fan, that was a pretty painful resort, and I'll just leave it at that. But the reason why I didn't pick that one is, again, the best win of the season. I'm only going for league play. I'm not gonna look at other competition. So yeah, I think this is definitely the best win of the season. Probably the best home performance that they had this season. They haven't had a lot of good home performance from this season when it comes to the goal scoring department and the chance creation, but this was definitely one of those rare times where they actually look competent on the attacking end. Now, of course, a big reason why this is the case is because they were playing against the San Jose Earthquakes, and if you know anything about the San Jose Earthquakes, and as I mentioned already in Moving Forward series, they're not good defensively. So yeah, I mean, I think it's a combination. You could say that for once, Los Verdes were decent going for on the attack, but it's also a combination of the fact that they were playing against one of the weakest defense in the league. So yeah, that is definitely playing to consideration. But still, that was a huge victory as well, because as I mentioned, that was a game where it really was a playoff 6 pointer. Both of those teams were right there neck and neck in terms of just above the red line. And yeah, for Austin, they got a massive 6 pointer in this one, and turns out that not only was a massive 6 pointer, one team that won that 6 pointer ended up making the playoffs, and the team that lost that 6 pointer, the San Jose Earthquakes, ended up missing out on the playoffs as a result. Worst loss of the season. I'm gonna go with the 3-1 loss that they had against St. Louis near the end of the season. So yeah, for Austin, one of the thing about Las Vegas this season is that they've been up and down at times this season. There's been some bad stretches that they had. There's some good stretches that they had. Near the end of the season, they definitely gone for a bit of a bad stretch, and this was definitely one of them. I mean, and I would say this was probably one of the most embarrassing loss that they had at home this season against an already eliminated St. Louis side. And I get that St. Louis was figuring things out as the season end, but the fact that in that game, I mean were uh, they they were outplayed in that game, and especially with the way that they want to get some momentum heading into playoffs, again, especially against a team that's already eliminated. Yeah, losing 3-1 at home against St. Louis and them completely getting outplayed in that game is definitely not going to give a lot of Austin fans some confidence that they're going to go too far in the playoffs. In fact, I did say that looking at this team heading into the playoffs, I didn't really give them a lot of shot, especially the team that they end up facing, LAFC. I know they, of course, they do well against LAFC in the regular season, but you got to remember, the two games that they face against LAFC. One of them, they of course got that surprising victory early the season against LAFC on the road, but that was back when LAFC wasn't doing well. And then the one that they got against LAFC in October, which I know some Austin fans might think that that might also be the best win of the season, at least in league play that is. But the reason why I didn't put that one there is because that was an LAFC team that was pretty much putting a backup team, and that was probably one of the most unwatchable game I've ever seen this season. I mean, that game was so bad that I even mentioned it when I did the review of that game. Let's not talk about this game again. Other than the fact that I think Austin fans were happy that they got somehow in some way got 3 points in the end, even though that game had no written all over it. Yeah. I mean, besides that one, you knew that they were gonna get absolutely destroyed by LAFC. And also, some might say that why don't I put the 4-1 loss against LAFC at home as the worst loss of the season? Well, the reason why I'm not going to put that in is because we kind of expected that that was going to be the case. You can't really put the worst loss of a season on the team that you know that they're going to get absolutely crushed, just like what we saw in the before the series against LAFC in the playoffs. So yeah, I'm gonna go with the 3-1 loss that they had against St. Louis as the worst loss of the season. Average attendance 20,738. That's been pretty much the number for Austin ever since they came into the league. Now that number obviously is definitely pay attendance because I've seen a lot of games at Q2 Stadium, both on TV and also in person back on August 30th, that there is no way in the world that number is correct. I mean, I saw a lot of empty seats when I was there, watched the Quakes play. So yeah, that number is definitely the pay attendance and definitely not butts in the seat. I mean, it was still pretty fill up. I would say about maybe 70% fill up in terms of the stands, but yeah, I definitely would heavily dispute that number as actually the people that is in the stands, and that even though Austin have said that they're proud that they have sold out every single home game ever since they came into the league, you start to see more empty seats at Q2 Stadium as the season goes along. And I don't blame some Austin fans maybe not show up because one, tickets are not cheap to go to Austin games still, and two, I mean, when you look at how they play at home and the boring brand of soccer, that's not really gonna have a lot of people tuning in, even if the team is doing well at times. Now, MVP of this team, it's got to be Owen Wolf. I mean, it's pretty easy. He leads the team in terms of the top goal scoring in his chart. He was really one of the rare player, at least on the attacking end, that was consistent throughout the season. So easily the MVP of this team. Disappointment. I'm gonna go with Murto Uzuni as a disappointment. I could have either gone with Uzuni or Vasquez in that spot, but in the end, I'm gonna go with Uzuni because Vasquez. He had a rough start to his time with Austin, and then he torn his ACL. And we will never know if he didn't torn his ACL whether or not if Vasquez would be able to live up his potential. I mean, to be fair, even though before he torn his ACL, he was still able to register with 5 goals as well. And it's kind of damning the fact that if you look at this Austin team, that a guy that's been pretty much out since July, the fact that he still ends up in the top five goal scoring chart on this team, and even at the top three as well. But yeah, Uzuni has been kind of a disappointment. He did pick up a little bit near the end of the season, and I think a big part of that is because of the way that the two striker system between Uzuni and Vasquez, it just doesn't feel like it fits either of those guys, and maybe that's gonna be something that Nico Estevez might have to think about heading into next season. But still, even though he did kind of pick that up a little bit late in the season, it's still considered a huge disappointment, especially with the price that they pay. I mean, as I'll mention in just a bit, they pretty much got very little when it comes to their DP contribution this season. Young player to watch. I know I could easily just pick Owen Wolf again, but I'm gonna give a shout out to CJ Foldry. I think CJ Foldry, a guy that coming off the bench in a couple of games last season, and kind of at times a little bit of an unknown, but he really become like the cult hero of this Austin team, especially the U.S. Open Cup as well. I mean, Austin fans will never get in terms of him scoring that 120-minute winner against Minnesota at Allianzville. But besides that, he also had some great moment as well in the regular season, coming as a super sub. Now, well, I think he will translate that into maybe have a chance to be in a starter. I don't know. I think he's more comfortable in terms of the super sub role. He definitely brings the energy when he comes off the bench, and as a result, I think he's definitely a guy that I always like players when they bring in energy, especially young players coming off the bench. So yeah, I'm gonna go with CJ Foldry, even though I think most people would say that it's got to be Owen Wolf in that young player to watch spot. I mean, he's definitely one of the more talented up and midfielder in this league. So what went right for this Austin team? They made it back to the playoffs. So after absent in the playoffs last year and after having a disastrous year last year as well, they're probably happy the fact that they're back in the playoffs, albeit they didn't really last very long in that spot. They made a spirit run in the U.S. Open Cup, and I think this is probably the biggest positive if you're an Austin fans in terms of how the season goes along. I mean, that U.S. Open Cup run to the final. I mean, there were multiple times where I'm just saying they don't look like they have any chance in terms of moving on. I mean, this even goes back to when they play against the Quakes. I thought they were gonna get run over by the Quakes in that game, and there were times even in extra time they face a lot of adversity, but somehow they still able to pull through and won in the PK shootout. And even in the game against Minnesota, I mean, I thought Minnesota with how good they've been in, they were going to derail Austin in that game, and it didn't happen. And despite the fact that Austin, in that game against Minnesota, while yes, Austin were able to score that big winning goal in the 120 minute, they didn't really do much in that game against the Loons. I mean, they really were kind of in survival mode, as you usually see with this Austin team. Almost kind of like a little bit of a throwback performance of last season, where whenever they're on the road, it's just like, yeah, let's pack it in and pray that the opponent doesn't score. And surprisingly, more times or not, that actually worked out for this Austin team. Albeit it was, if you're an Austin fan or even a neutral fan, it's pretty hard to watch and almost borderline haram ball level. Actually, not even borderline, but simply haram ball level in terms of what they do on the road. But hey, they won that game. They made it to the final of the U.S. Open Cup and able to play in front of their home fans as well. So that's definitely a huge highlight for this Austin fan base to enjoy. And then let's also not forget about Brad Stuver as well. I haven't actually mentioned him. I probably should have also gave him a shout out in terms of being the MVP of this team as well, because he was absolutely immense in goal. This was probably the, if not the best season that Brad Stuver has had it between the stick for Austin FC. I mean, he has had some good season, but this season he definitely took it up to another notch and well deserved in terms of being selected in the All Star and able to play in front of his home fans for the All Star game as well. So what went wrong for this Austin team? Yeah, the attack was bad, and I put bad in all caps because yeah, this was a team that if you're a neutral, I'm pretty sure that not a lot of neutral would like to watch Austin FC games, because some of their games that they play are some of the most boring kind of brand of soccer, almost kind of terrorist ball at times. What we've seen from this Austin side, and I also think that it's not just the fact that the attack was bad because of the lack of DP contribution, which again that's kind of the next point that kind of went wrong with this. The DP contribution was absolutely atrocious between Uzuni, Vasquez, and Bakari. None of those guys did very well to justify their DP tag. But it's also something that I think for Austin fans, this is kind of something that Dallas fan warned them when they got Nico Estevez, where this is kind of what Estevez did when he was with FC Dallas, kind of played that boring brand of soccer, but still able to get the result. And Dallas fans obviously weren't happy about that, especially with the attacking talent that they had. And yeah, this is gonna we've kind of started to see the same thing with Austin this season. But again, it's kind of part of that, and also with the way that they just didn't really get a lot of contribution on the DP spot, and not to mention. I know it's also easy to point the fingers on both Vasquez and Uzuni in terms of that spot, but I think, as we'll talk about in just a bit, there's a reason why they didn't not only didn't get DP contribution or a contribution from any of the DP player, but I think there's a pretty good reason why their attack was bad in terms of a tactical standpoint. And then, of course, the U.S. Open Cup final disappointment. So, as spirit as that run to the U.S. Open Cup final, it's got to be disappointed that they end up losing in that final. I mean, to be fair, it was going to be tough no matter what. They had to face against a Nashville side that PJ Callahan side was definitely ready for that game. And when it comes to the talent wise, Nashville was definitely more talented coming into that game against Austin. But you just kind of have a sense, you have a cup final in front of your home fans, and it's definitely the atmosphere that you just kind of feel like that was a huge missed opportunity to lift the trophy and finally give your fans a first ever trophy win in your young franchise history, and actually kind of brush off in terms of some of the disappointing tournaments that they had in the past, because it's kind of hard to believe, but this U.S. Open Cup final run, this is by far one of the deepest that Austin has made in terms of going for the tournament. I mean, besides what we saw in the second year when they made it to the conference final, some of these last couple of games involving tournament style, yeah, they have not been very good, and I don't even need to remind them about what happened in the Concacaf Champions Cup as well. So moving forward, look at this Austin team. Obviously, they already done some good business in the transfer window. They made a couple of key signing. Obviously, today they locked up Owen Wolf to a long-term extension, which that makes perfect sense. But they also make some big signings in terms of elsewhere as well. Bringing Jaden Nelson, I think that is definitely a smart signing, especially after them moving on from Bakari, which I just kind of had a feeling this offseason they were gonna have to move on from one of their DP players that was underachieving, so they elected to move on from Bakari. Though it kind of helped the fact that Bakari himself he kind of wants to leave the team and want to go back to Europe, and Austin, of course, get granted his wish. So yeah, they kind of done good business in terms of opening a DP spot, and like I said, bringing Jaden Nelson, he is definitely considered to be an upgrade compared to Bakari, especially with what he did during his time with Vancouver. He's going to bring a lot of speed and a lot of good transitional moments, and also some flair too for this Austin team heading into next season. And then also getting Joseph Rosales as well. I mean, as much as I said before that I don't regret Minnesota decided to move on from Joseph Rosales, considering he kind of had a down season last year, he's still a decent player, I think, for this Austin team. And especially with Bureau getting a lot of interest, either in the remaining part of the winter or even as soon as the summer transfer window, Rosales feels like it's kind of like a backup plan for Austin, that in case if they do decide to move on for Burrows and cash in for that, then Rosales will definitely slot in that spot, and they don't really lose too much quality in terms of that either. The second thing I think is going to be a big question for Austin is they need to get their other DPS going again, and that of course you now look at Uzuni and Vasquez, where they have a bounce back season heading into next year, and I think the one way that they can of course have a bounce back year, they need a playmaker. And this is kind of what said about the reason why both of those guys really struggle. I mean, part of that is the system that Nico Estevez run. It feels a little bit more defensive than it needs to be in terms of unlocking the talent of both of those guys. But the other issue with this team, and it's just the way that they built this team, they really don't have a playmaker on this team that feeds the ball to your number nine. I mean, when you don't have a playmaker and you're really hoping that your number nine can get those assists and also your wingers to do so. And for the most part, some of their wingers didn't really quite do that. Yeah, I mean, you can see what's the problem and the main issue in terms of actually getting contribution from your number nine. So this is why the third point. This is really important for this Austin team heading into this offseason. They need a DP level number 10. They haven't had a DP level number 10 since they let go of Dreyusi. I mean, to be fair, they still really haven't replaced him ever since that. So that is going to be something that they're definitely going to be looking for. And like I said, especially with the way that Bakar is now longer there, and that they open a DP spot as a reserve, that should be a spot that be fill up for that creative number 10, or even just any creative player on this team to kind of put the pressure off of Owen Wolf a lot. I mean, as talented as Owen Wolf is, he's not gonna be the guy that do everything all the time. So there's no doubt that they definitely are gonna go to get that DP10, and if they can get that DP10, and he's the guy that can actually dictate it, something similar to what we saw with Dreyusi did for this Austin team. This is a team that can definitely get themselves back to where they were in the second in season. In fact, I would say if Dreyusi was still on this team, and if Dreyusi was actually like the Dreyusi that we saw in his second season, this team could definitely easily be one of the top team, because they have a very solidified defense. And now, if you have a playmaker pulling the string, and if both Uzuni and Vasquez are scoring the goals, then all of a sudden this things are looking right for this Austin team. But that's definitely the big question you got to say about this team, in terms of the fact that because of the lack of goals, and a big part is because of the way that their system is run, and the way that they built the roster. They're unless if they address that biggest issue, this is kind of where they're probably gonna be last season in terms of their peak. They're probably not gonna finish higher than fifth or fourth if they don't figure out the attacking situation. And the defense can only do so much, and also Brad Stuver can only go Superman so many times before they need to address, as I said, the elephant of the room, and that is they need to fix this attack heading into the next season. But then, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you like, smash the subscribe button. As always, let me know in the comments below if you're an Austin fan. Who is the MVP, disappointment, young player to watch, what went right, what went wrong, and most importantly, moving forward, how is this team going to look heading into next season? But until then, hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you guys next time.